Okay, so in the last video we figured out how to set up a trigger volume so that our trigger volume actually works when the player steps into it and it can do stuff. That's actually a very, very important step because now you see that these events, these red events inside of the event graph, allow us to trigger off and fire off different commands when certain things happen. Okay? So just to go over that real quick so you can understand it a little bit better for your future projects. An event is basically, it could be a player walking into a trigger volume. That's an event, which we just saw. An event can also be when a rocket flies out of a gun and hits a wall and then explodes. The event of the rocket hitting the wall at a certain amount of speed or whatever causes an explosion. And an explosion is basically a particle effect of a bunch of sparks and flames and fire and smoke and little chunks of concrete or whatever flying all over the place. So events are really important to understand. They're really important because they're kind of the intersection point of when stuff happens. Okay? Say a star goes supernova. That's an event. The fact that the star went supernova is an event. The resulting explosion is just a really cool looking effect. Unless you're anywhere inside the blast radius of a supernova, then you're probably not thinking it's as cool as I think it is. But anyway, we're not going to worry about that right now. So, now that we know that this thing works and it can trigger stuff off, I'm going to start hooking stuff up to it. Now, I'm going to start moving at a little bit more of a brisk pace. I felt I've been talking quite a bit and explaining stuff really slowly. I'm going to start moving a little bit faster, and as these tutorial videos go on, I'll start to crank up the speed a little bit. I'm not going to go so fast that you're not seeing what I'm doing or I'm skipping steps. I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to start moving a little bit quicker here, picking up the pace a bit. You'll see. Blueprint's not that hard once you start to figure stuff out and you get used to it. So, what we need to do is we need to use this trigger volume, and let's just jump back into our level. Let's see what we need to do. So I know the trigger volume works. When I step into it, it does stuff. Except I haven't told Unreal what to do yet. So what do we want to have happen? Well, we want this door to move down, and we want it to stay open. And then we want, for once we're away from the door, like let's say you already went through it, went the other side, and went on your way. If you were to turn back and look at it and you're far enough away from the trigger, the door should close. Okay? And it doesn't matter if you're in front of the door or in back of it, it should just close. And then if you come in proximity of the door again, it should open. And then if you leave again, it should close. That's kind of the behavior that we want to do with this super door. Alright? So to get it to open, how are we going to do that? Well, we can do that in a pretty kind of cool, simple way. We can use something called a timeline to actually move the door, which is pretty cool. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to see how we can do that. And I'm going to kind of freestyle this a bit. So you're going to see me create nodes. Maybe I'll create the wrong node, delete it, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of a cool way to work because you actually get to kind of sit there and think about stuff. And this is typically how working in blueprints works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click here and I'm going to go to add timeline. Now timeline is a special kind of node. Now I'm going to rename this timeline. I'm going to call this door underscore movement, just so that it makes sense. And this timeline can help. It can help us move the door, and that's what we need to do. We need the door to move down, out of the way of the player, and then back up once the player is gone. Once they're on their way out and they're far away, we need that door to close back up again. And that's what this timeline is going to do for us. Okay. Now before we do that, we're going to have to set up a few different parameters and different things like that. So let's see what we can do here. We're going to need the door mesh. So if we go over to our components, we have a door mesh and then we have a door frame mesh. So which one is it that we want to move up and down to open a door? Is it the frame? No, I don't think we want to move this frame. I think what we want to move is this door right here, this guy. See that? We want that guy to move. So the way that we're going to do that is, let's jump back to the graph. We can see that we have, under variables, we have our door mesh here. Now we're going to end up with a bunch of variables, so it's pretty important to organize this stuff. So I'm going to go to door mesh here, and I'm going to go down to its details. See this? It doesn't have a lot of details, but it's got a few. We're going to go to category, and if I hit this drop down list in category, we just have default. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and rename the category to something else. I'm going to call this, let's call it door stuff. Not very creative with names, so I'm just going to call it door stuff. You're going to see a new category was created, and this guy was placed in door stuff. I'm going to take the door frame mesh, and I'm going to go to the drop down, and now we see that we have this door stuff category. I'm going to select that, and now both of these guys are placed right here under door stuff, which is pretty cool. Okay, so if we have other types of categories, we can do that. Normally you want to categorize this a little bit different. I just called it door stuff, which is kind of a useless name for a category. It defeats the purpose of it, but oh well, I'm not very good with names, so I'm just going to go ahead and keep it as is. I'm going to take the door mesh, not the door frame, but the door mesh, and I'm going to drag and drop it over here. Now when I do that, before it places it inside of the graph, Unreal needs to know something. So Unreal goes, wait. If you're going to drop this on the graph, what do you want me to drop? Do you want me to drop a get or a set? Now if you're new to this, you're going to think, well, what in the world is a get and what in the world is a set? So let's place a get. This is what a get looks like. It's this little oval thing. It says door mesh so that you know that it's this door mesh variable. Basically, this node here represents this mesh. Okay? So if you were to take this mesh and place it on the graph, instead of having a mesh that looks like this, what you get instead is this little node. And this node represents that mesh. Essentially, they're the same thing. They're one and the same. This node is the door mesh, right? So now we have it in the graph. We can start to do stuff with it. So we know that we need to take this door and we need to move it, right? Well, now that it's in the graph, we can create nodes like this that tell this door to move or do something, which is pretty cool. Okay, but before we move the door, we have to get its location. We need its location. Remember, Unreal has to be told things in baby steps. So when we get the door, we need to be able to tell Unreal that this is a location right here, right? When it opens like this is a second location. So we need to be able to tell Unreal that those specific instructions. So to do that is actually pretty simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this blue pin, drag it out, and I'm going to get that context menu. And if you're wondering why I keep doing that instead of coming over here and looking for nodes here and dragging them over, it's simple. It's because if I go in here, it's going to take me forever to find stuff, and I could use the search field to narrow it down, but it's just, I find it, my personal preference, it's so much faster and easier to just drag this out and use this. You're going to notice as I work on this more and more, I never really come over here to the library, and I don't really use favorites a lot. You could. I'm not saying it's wrong. Everyone has a different preference, you know, different preference of using the tools. So I like using this. To me, it's faster and simpler. So we know that we need to get the location of this guy. So we need to get the location. So let's type get and start to type in location. And here's something. Get relative location. Let's go ahead and grab that. And we got a target, we've got a relative location. This might be what we need to use, it might not be. So we'll see. Now to go back to this door mesh over here, if I drag and drop it, remember that set parameter or that set mode? If we get that, we get a different icon. Now it's still the door mesh, that's important to understand. But it's now a set node. And basically what a get node does is it's going to get this mesh right here and put it into our graph, which is a lot of times what you want to do. Sometimes you want to set information. What a set does is it'll change the value. It'll change this. So imagine coming in here, grabbing this door, right? Going here to static mesh, right? And changing the mesh for something else. You want to set the mesh to a different value, right? To a different static mesh. So static mesh is a value, and if you were to select a different one, you would be setting a different mesh for this static mesh parameter. That's essentially what a setter does. It allows you in Blueprint, in code, to set a different value or a different static mesh for this door mesh variable. Alright? So that's all that a setter does. That's all it is. So it's pretty easy to understand. Not hard at all. Okay? So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to look for a function here called set row location, set relative location, add relative location. We've got a whole bunch of different ones here that we can use. I'm going to get a set relative location. That's probably going to work. I'm going to get rid of this guy. I don't need that guy. Again, Blueprint is a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of playing around with different nodes until you get something, start to get something that works. So I got a set relative location. What I also want to do is get myself a lerp node. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to grab a lerp. And what I want is a lerp vector. And I have this one here. Now you're probably wondering, well, why in the world did you get this lerp vector? Well, you'll see a little bit later how this comes in useful. Lerp is shorthand for linear interpolation, which is basically nerd talk for saying that two items are going to interpolate between each other. Okay, so basically what that means is if you're sitting in front of a table and there's a coffee mug or a cup on a table, place it to the left of you on the table. Now take the cup with your right hand and slide it right across the table toward the right side of you. You just linearly interpolated that cup from point A to point B. That's a lerp. That's all it is. And lerp can be used to lerp between vectors, between different pieces of data. If we right click and we go back to lerp, you notice that we can do rotator, we can do vector, which is what we're using now, transform, linear color, a bunch of different things. So you can lerp between an A and a B of different data types. Right now we're using a vector. And a vector is basically 3 coordinates that represent X, Y, and Z. If I go back to components and I select this door mesh, you notice that my widget here for moving has a Z, which is the blue arrow, a Y, which is the green, and an X, which is the red. That's your X, Y, Z world coordinates. That's your coordinate system to know how to get around in 3D space, right? Those are your 3 dimensions. So a vector is those 3 dimensions. And you can see down here we have value for A, value for B, and what we have is an X, Y, and Z for both the A and B. And then we have this, and then we have this alpha value down here, which we're not going to go over right now. We're going to go over that a little bit later. Also, this video has been running for about 15 minutes now. So I'm going to end this one here, and in the next one we're just going to pick up where we left off.